Okay, good morning, everybody. We're just on 9:30, so let's get going. As you know, this morning we've asked Dr. Wynand Goosen to talk to us about AI and its use by learners in assessment. You recall from our last conversations about AI that one of the areas that is most confusing or most uncertain is what happens with our assessment instruments when some learners at least will have access to AI and are likely to be using AI to assist them in assessment. What is that? How do we then understand the results of that assessment? What's our strategy for going forward? And in our last session, the request from people was we run a workshop around that, or the suggestion, we run a workshop around that. But our thinking is that before we try and get some definition of the way forward, we need to start getting better ideas as to what's happening here by asking a few people to talk around it from their own perspective to inform us. It's an area where I think there's a lot of development that's still going to take place. And we need to kind of watch out for that development before we know how we can actually proceed. So we've asked two people to talk on it. Bennett is one of them. Please, as you know, it's a conversations event. Your mics will be muted, but please make this an interactive session. Raise questions in the chat box or any comments that you want to make. I will moderate as ever, and I'll bring them to the attention of Wynand at whatever seems a convenient time. So Wynand, thank you, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Morning, Andy. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. What a marvelous privilege to be talking to the ASDSA. I am sincerely happy to be here this morning chatting to all of you. Your organization is something that is always going to be something close to my heart, going back to a good 22, 23 years. Skills development facilitation was one of the things where I cut my teeth at the advent of the CETA systems. So yes, Andy and ASDSA management, thank you so much for the opportunity to chat to you. I hope that this can be a very interactive conversation. And please, at the outset, I want to also just tell everybody that I'm not presenting this as an expert. I'm just an observer like everybody else. And I think at this stage of the game, to set the scene in the context, I believe that there are a lot more questions than answers. And I think as far as we are concerned, we are at the stage where we should be asking the questions rather than coming up with answers and the way forward with regards to the use of AI per se. That being said, I wanted to just take the opportunity to outline a few of the observations that I've had so far. I've been asked by the private education industry to start working on the development of a set of standards for AI. I was very enthusiastic when I started, and I thought this is not going to be so difficult. And the more I look at it, every time I look at it, the true observer principle in quantum physics apply. Every time I look at this thing, it seems to change face and it morphs into something else. So the central concern in AI implementation in the education industry started off as one of fear. I know that one of my colleagues, a professor from a Malaysia university, said to me, maybe we shouldn't tell our students, and we laughed about that. But I think the rabbit is out of the cage, so to speak, and there's no putting it back. So where we are at this stage of the game, I first and foremost want to prompt you and say to you, start thinking about the questions in your own mind. What are the things that you are concerned about, and what are the trends that you're seeing? That's the most important thing, as rather than try and say, okay, fine, what would be the rules and the application at this stage. So I also have observed that since it started, there's definitely a diminishment of the initial fear of AI. And the focus is now shifting to how AI can be utilized and what the impact is on the human thinking. And that really is debatable. From my side, as I started off with developing industry standards and saying we need to start off by looking at what is the ethical line. What is okay, what's not okay. And I started off by saying to people that I believe that when you use AI, as an educator in the editor sense and in the personal assistant sense, you're okay. And what I mean by that is that if I, as a student, for example, use the AI to edit and to correct my language and improve my submission of, say, for example, a master's thesis, that is okay, and there's no difference to that, or using a real life human to do the editing and the advisory for me. However, if I'm asking the AI to write my entire thesis for me, then it's a question where you can literally say it's the same as paying somebody to write your master's for you, and that's clearly on the opposite side of the ethical line. And in one of my research projects, I also played around and I battled to define my own a part of my own research. And eventually I decided I'm going to actually ask the AI to do that for me, which it has done beautifully, better than I could. And I said to myself, but now I can't use this because I've exceeded the ethical line. And I'm still debating it with myself. And no, I haven't used it in my formal research as my own work. However, I must tell you that to me, it made me think that where does the origin of the intellectual property lie? Because you could be as smart as what you like, but if you don't know how to prompt the AI, and this was one of my lessons, is that it's definitely something that won't help you. It's as good as having a personal assistant that is very, very intelligent, but if you don't know what to ask your very intelligent personal assistant, you're not going to get very much productivity out of such a person. And to me, the AI so far is really quite the same. The question is, yes, sir.
Can I make a comment on that? I mean, I think what you've said actually summarizes exactly the dilemma that we're talking about today. You from your side are saying you're using AI, but you're saying ethically it's a question.
Yes,
and you are backing away from saying, well, I can't present this as my own work, but that's your own moral approach to it, saying it's the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to be quite as ethical as you are. And that's our dilemma. People will be using AI to respond to assessment requirements. And what do we do? That's, yeah, okay.
This is exactly why I'm bringing it up, because I think that from a control point of view, from the other side of the fence, what we need to do as academia and academic managers is we would have to really start thinking about how are we going to actually assess a student in the future, given the fact that the work that is presented to you may very well be AI work. Now, yes, of course, there is lots of technology that is going to help you and assist you. Like there's a new type of algorithm which is going to help you with smart assessment, where you'll have an assessor instrument which would literally be able to say to you as the assessor, there's an AI detection in the work that has been submitted. But remember, for every piece of technology to detect smart AI, there's going to be another piece of technology developed by somebody that can say, let's see how we can outsmart it. So the cycle's never going to stop. So this type of situation, you would also be able to measure in terms of predictive analysis. It's one of the other fantastic latest technology. And this works in the same basis of you having your credit card stolen, and the bank actually phones you and says to you, Mr. Reinecke, your credit card is now being used in some sort of neighborhood where you never go. It's out of spirit. And that out of spiritness is going to be the thing that's going to detect whether in fact the assessment or the work that the learner submitted is or isn't legitimate. And it may detect that the language be too perfect, or this seems to be a quantum leap in the way the learner actually approaches it as well. I see there is a raised question. No? Is there a hand coming up?
I've asked them if they'll type it into the chat box.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So to my mind, and this is one of the first observations I have, is that our assessments are going to be have to be focused very much on work applied learning. AI as it stands is going to impact everything that we do in terms of curriculum development, everything that we do in terms of assessment design, And everything that we have done so far in terms of QCTO work, the way syllabus is being structured and developed at universities, it's going to impact all of that. Way back in my distant youth, when I was with the then Wits Technikon, I used to follow an author called Eric Jensen that predicted by the year 2012, human information will double every 30 days. We're about to enter 2024. So the shelf life of information, of knowledge, of things to know is probably 10 days by the latest predictions. So the future isn't going to be based on what you know. The future is going to be based on how you can apply and how you can come up with new synapse responses using the information that you have, and how do you actually synthesize that into new meaningful results. And this is going to be the new definition of learning from the viewpoint that I have at the moment. But let's see how that changes. You know, I might change my perspective in a week or two. So I see there is a question from Angela.
Angela's question is, in fact, she says, just a comment, so much is up to personal ethics and your intention for learning. If you truly wanted to learn rather than just have a certificate, you would use AI ethically, but doesn't solve the problems we now face as skills development practitioners trying to ensure learning is actually taking place.
Yeah, and I fully want to support that. If I think, for example, with the implementation in the workplace, with clients that implement learnerships and the new programs, QCTO programs, etc., this is really going to go to the point where I've been trying to focus and been saying this for a couple of years, how we implement those learnerships and those training programs especially in the corporate environment is going to be extremely important, and how we measure and what we measure is going to be even more important. So what I'm trying to say is that workplace assessment and workplace performance is going to be more important, because that's the only way in which you're going to really be able to measure. It's all well and fine that you can say that, oh, I know this and I know that. Well, that might be supported by AI. We don't know that you really know that. Do you really know that? Let us see whether in fact you can apply it. It's you know, knowledge is understanding how to boil water. Application is knowing what to do with hot water. And unless you can demonstrate that you can make coffee or tea or whatever it is that you want to do with the hot water, the knowledge component of the understanding the recipe is going to be less important. But as I say, these observations from my side.
So there are two comments. One from Liesel saying, please provide the source for the doubling of knowledge if you have it. We'd like to read about it some more, so maybe we can come back to that.
I can.
And then from Sylvia Hammond, understand your points on ethical questions. A slightly different concern, I believe, is the influence of USA hegemony over the use of language and values, which do not represent SA language and constitutional values, already visible in predictive text in Word and emails.
Yes, and Sylvia, thank you for that comment. You know, you're on a topic which I really enjoy, and what I call the acquiescent ontology. And by that I mean is that we are constantly being bombarded through media, through even through educators and stuff, in terms of what they want us to perceive reality to be. If you start looking at what is happening politically on a global scale right now, you realize that people are actually starting to wake up and they're starting to decide for themselves. And I think in the future, we won't have the situation like we did in the past, where you can simply present a new suggested reality and people are just going to buy into it. And I don't see why we should. You know, it literally talks to contextual awareness, and it talks to fundamentally our spiritual evolution. And it is what it is. You know, how do we get away from it? We are evolving, and our awareness levels for all of these things and our ability to create our own reality is clearly demonstrated in something like this.
Sorry, there are two more. One is from Sharon Blino saying, I agree with Angela, perhaps the situation is that we have the same challenges, but new tools that challenge the ethical application of true learning, understanding, and competence.
Yes, indeed.
Then Sylvia Hammond saying acquiescent ontology, which obviously resonates. Hey, Sylvia.
Exactly. So
Oh,
it
listen,
really is.
lastly, you're on 16 minutes in, 14 to go.
Right. So, and on this topic as well, then if you look at it from before we talk about evolving assessment strategies, I want to also just mention on that specifically for Sylvia and Co. and on that thread. One of the latest sort of references in terms of human evolution talks about a concept called Homo digitalis, from Homo sapiens to Homo digitalis, which is starting to ask us, who are we spiritually as a result of our interaction with technology? What is the future? Who will we be? We are no longer going to be just biological entities. With the type of technology that's on the table, with the interface that the human mind will have with the internet and the access to digital, which is going to literally create a situation where you and I are going to be online as individuals, and not necessarily through a device per se, but literally physically connected to the internet. A scary thought to some, and where does it take us? It's more of a question than an answer. And and that poses the question of, if we are then going to still measure knowledge, measure, like I always like to put it, human capital, how will we quantify human capital in the future? If there is this sort of like synchronicity and this type of a oneness where everybody knows everything, how do you then measure qualifications? How do you measure assessment? How do you measure the evolution of learning per se? And again, ladies and gentlemen, sorry to overemphasize, but it is again a question of identifying the burning points. What will the questions of the future be? So I think to just deep dive a little bit into the issue of assessments, the way I'm looking at it is that your testing systems, your assessments, would have to be more and more diverse than ever before. AI is going to pose a threat and a question on the very VARCS principles that we also used to when it gets to assessments. We would have to literally look at how we would redefine that. We would have to also look at visual work and oral assessments. You won't be able to just simply rely on a written assessment the way we did in the past. And in its own fashion, this also then justifies the external examinations, which are now coming to the fore with the new QCTO model. This actually sort of like justifies the fact that you may have to have an external examination. For me, this is starting to look like we need an entire new learning model. If I get into the detail of it, and how we are actually going to develop the application of it, and how will we develop a presentation on creating human capital, because this is what we're going to have to do. We will, as skills development facilitators, we would have to go back to our industry clients, and we would have to say to them, in the future, your human capital management strategy should look as follows. This is how you're going to have to look at performance assessment. This is how you're going to have to look at qualifications, training, management, etc. The impact is going to be quite profound. But I still submit that if we get ahead of the curve and we start now by asking more questions than, as opposed to trying to find the answers before we understand really what the questions are, I think we can get ahead of the curve, and we can definitely create a type of a scenario where we can turn it on its head and truly benefit from the development of AI. And what would it really entail? Reviewing educational standards. Yeah, definitely the way in which we develop standards is going to be very important. If you just think about how you would have to, for example, rewrite a unit standard to accommodate for the existence of AI, I can imagine that I would do it very differently now. As to how, I don't know. I will have to sit down and get a whole lot of smart people like yourselves in the room and debate it and come up with something. We would also have to redefine qualification requirements as we know it. And we literally have to link our certification linked to meeting new types of standards. So to my way of thinking then, I think it really certainly suggests a shift from knowledge to application-based assessments. And we got to look at what we're going to do in terms of the relevance of applied knowledge. We're going to have to really look at now, what is the outcomes that we measure? And I submit that somehow this is going to push us more towards a type of a meritocracy, which I don't know whether that's such a bad thing, as long as we have the support systems for the people at the bottom. It doesn't help that we develop a society which is overtly sophisticated, whilst half of our population don't even have access to Wi-Fi, let alone a device. So, you know, it's all well and fine for us to talk about all of these beautiful things, but we can't do this in isolation. Remember that our unemployment rate is still sitting at like 28%, and we still have vast populations, sections of the population in rural communities that don't even have access to the internet. So, you know, it becomes a theoretical discussion for them. That being said, I also want to just circle back to maybe just mentioning the issues pertaining to fourth industrial revolution soft skills. My top 3 favorites: critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and problem solving. To me now is really highly demonstrated when we are talking about this concept. I think it's absolutely essential that we create the basis of the triangle by introducing critical thinking into people's day-to-day activity. Without critical thinking, ladies and gentlemen, academic performance is never really going to be possible. And the same goes for emotional intelligence. If we can't develop to the point where we sense what a situation is and start to accommodate situations where we can read the room, to list but one example, it's going to hamper our ability to perform academically. It's going to hamper our ability to perform professionally. Work skills are going to suffer. It's going to be just something which is going to be very, very difficult to manage, i.e. problem solution will suffer. Yeah, and I see somebody is posting change management will have to be very critical. Absolutely. I think the whole thing is about change management. We would definitely have to look at how we can rethink the change, because there is going to be a transformation in thinking in the next couple of years with this type of introduction. For those of us that thought, you know, we can now retire because of the end of the SACWA type system and the new QCTO thing, hey, think again, hey. There's a whole lot of things happening, and it's a whole new world out there.
Wynand, before you go on, just kind of make a comment about that first point that you had there, the shift to application-based. It seems to me that the QCTO type qualifications have an advantage over the CHE type qualifications, and that the new occupational qualifications actually have a really strong focus on what happens in the workplace, application-based assessment. Is that your picture as well?
Definitely. I must say that I think that the QCTO philosophy is now being demonstrated in its validity with the introduction of AI per se. So what I'm really saying is that if you thought before that the sort of like QCTO type of style of qualifications and occupations wasn't really up your street and questioned it. I mean, I myself had my doubts, but I think right now with the introduction of AI, you know, this type of thinking, the OFO occupational type of profiles, what turns out it was pretty future focused, if you ask me.
Well, thanks.
Now the rest of the crowd would feel about that. So yeah, I think from the CHE perspective, again, my observations, I'm not speaking on behalf of the CHE sector, not at all, but from a point of view of a student rather than anything else. I think the way in which CHE situations and development has been conducted in the past, there would be quite a risk for academia. But I think it's a wonderful risk, and I think it's a marvelous challenge, because it's going to get academia to think on the next level. I think the challenge is going to be that there would be a lot more open-mindedness. One would have to think about how you're going to use AI. For example, one of the things that I tried is that in writing an article, I asked the AI to justify a certain position and to find me references that support that, which it then promptly did. Fortunately, I went and double-checked on those references. Sadly, all of those references are completely made up. I then prompted and played with the AI, and I said to it, I think you lied to me, to which the reply was, no, I can't lie. I'm a language model. I put language together. But the long and the short of the story is it literally invents scenarios. And one must be very, very careful as to how you use it, because it's not that easy. It's not that straightforward. AI is never going to be the replacement of your own brain in its totality. You cannot use it and not edit the documents that you use. You can get it to assist you, but it doesn't replace you. And to me, I think that's like a really very important point that I want to impart today.
And you've on 2 minutes to go, hey?
Great. Okay, so as I said, the most important thing is to identify the relevant questions. We should really get to the point where we remain alert and aware. And I want to conclude by saying the most important things we can do is to adopt a let things develop approach. Let's be more observational. Let's have a beginner's mind with this thing and prod it and play with it like a child with a new toy. And let us first discover it rather than be intimidated by it or reject it. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks, Wynand. Before you go, and look, thanks for bringing us in on time. There are some other comments and questions, and maybe if people are still available to hang on a little after 10, you can do that. So one, Sylvia Hammond commented, agree, and the need to review the purpose of education to create a better life for all. Claude said, QCTO is giving practical learning skills going back through the boiled water scenario mentioned at the beginning. It gives the learners the opportunity to be innovative as well. William Rogers saying, do learners not need knowledge before they can apply it? How do we overcome this challenge with immature learners? Any thoughts on that comment?
That's William, that is a very, very interesting question indeed. And this is one of the things where, again, I'm not going to propose an answer. I think that's one of the things that needs to go on the board as a very important question. And it has to be debated. That question has to be unpacked. And a lot of input has to be obtained to be able to really honestly answer that. The days in which one should rely on one or two minds to prescribe and tell us what we should do, as far as I'm concerned, is over. We really need to move to the point where we have a collective thinking as to what would be sensible to answer that question.
Sunette Duval saying this is going to require a lot of open-mindedness. Leclerc saying again, William, I think then it would need to be aligned to performance management.
Yes, I agree. Definitely, it would have to be. We would have to look at performance management. You know, not so long ago, I reminded. I was in a group of intellectuals where I reminded them that structure follows strategy. And when we want to actually talk about structure, we have to make sure that our strategy is in place. Right now, we're in the stage where we are analyzing, so we haven't got a strategy. Once we understand the strategy of what it is that we want to do, given the fact that there's this introduction of AI, only then can we say, okay, fine, what are the structures? And the structures then says, okay, fine, policies, procedures. And that has to be linked to literally job descriptions, which has to be linked in turn to OFO qualifications, occupational qualifications, and so forth. And your project planning would have to flow out of that. Now, to me, this is going to force us as well to stop thinking so segmented and start thinking more integratedly. Because if we don't do that, we are going to keep doing what we're doing right now. And as I was saying to somebody yesterday, all your policies and procedures, all well and fine. Do yourself a favor. Look out the window. What has it created? We're in a country with 28% unemployment or something ridiculous like that. People are starving, but as long as they do so procedurally in this country, we tend to think that that's okay. Well, I think it's not okay. We need to understand what is the main objective. And from the main objective, Once we can understand that and analyze that, then we can develop an action plan.
So there's a bunch more comments, Wynand. Sylvia saying what knowledge and whose knowledge requires questioning. Sharon Bruno saying exciting times ahead. It is the age of skills development. Thank you so much for stimulating conversation. We're saying good morning. Will the recording? Yes, it is available. Sylvia again, 70% of youth. So
exactly. Wow.
Wynand,
So you see, all our thinking, talking, policies, procedures. What is it? It's, as I like to say to people, it's Sunday afternoon. What's for lunch, guys? And if you say, sorry, there's nothing for lunch, but you know what? We followed policies and procedures. And I'm saying to you, your policies and procedures means nothing.
Yeah.
It doesn't create anything. And we need to understand very, very clearly what is the future ontology that we want to create. And if we understand what is the new reality that we want to manifest, then manifesting it through our actions is what we need to do.
Wynand, thank you so much. This has been a really stimulating and engaging session, and really we appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Everybody, thanks for joining us. I think we're done for the day. As you know, there is a recording available. You'll find the link in the WhatsApp description, if I'm right, Angelique. And until next time, bye everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a good Friday.